You are listening to Mystic Bedtime Stories, where history whispers, time softens, ancient worlds come alive, just as your day winds down and sleep begins. Take a deep breath and settle in comfortably. Let your shoulders relax and allow your mind to drift back through the Centuriasto, a time when the world was quieter, gentler, and filled with simple wonders. Close your eyes and imagine yourself floating back through time, past the bustling cities and highways of today, beyond the Industrial Revolution, beyond the Middle Ages, all the way back to the very beginning of human civilization, to ancient Egypt, when the world was young and full of possibility. Picture a landscape bathed in golden sunlight, where endless stretches of desert sand meet the most remarkable river on earth, the Nile. This mighty river flows like a ribbon of life through an otherwise barren land, its waters dark and mysterious, carrying with them the promise of tomorrow. In those ancient days, long before the great pyramids rose toward the heavens, before pharaohs wore crowns of gold, there were simply people much like you and Muho discovered something truly magical about this river. Every year, as predictable as the sunrise, the Nile would swell with waters from distant mountains and faraway rains. But this wasn't a destructive flood to be feared. No, this was nature's greatest gift. The river would gently overflow its banks, spreading across the dry earth like a blessing, leaving behind rich, dark soil that transformed the desert into a garden dot. Can you imagine the wonder of those first farmers as they watched their seeds sprout in this fertile earth? Barley and wheat grew tall and golden. Flax plants swayed in the breeze, their fibers destined to become the finest linen. Date palms heavy with fruit provided shade and sweetness. The people raised gentle cattle and kept flocks of ducks that paddled contentedly in the shallows. Life moved at the pace of the river itself, steady, unhurried, in harmony with the natural world. Villages grew along the banks like flowers, their homes built from sundried bricks that kept families cool during the hot days and warm during the cool nights. Children played by the water's edge while their parents worked in the fields, and fishermen guided their simple reed boats across the calm surface, their movements creating gentle ripples that caught the light like scattered diamonds. The rhythm of life was beautiful in its simplicity. The sun marked their days, the moon counted their months, and the stars told stories across the vast desert sky. These early people lived closely with nature, understanding that they were part of something much larger than themselves. They felt the divine presence in everything around them. The warmth of the sun on their faces was like the breath of a benevolent God. The wind rustling through the papyrus reeds carried whispered messages from the spirit world. The river itself was sacred, a living God that sustained all life. At night, when the work was done and families gathered around their fires, they would look up at the star-filled sky and feel connected to eternity. They developed a deep belief in the continuity of life and the journey of the soul, and in the power of love to transcend even death. These weren't primitive people, but rather the wise ancestors who laid the foundation for one of history's greatest civilizations. They were dreamers and builders, storytellers and farmers, parents and children who found joy in simple pleasures and meaning in their connection to the land and each other. Over time, a visionary leader emerged from the South, a man whose name may be lost to history, but whose dream was grand: to unite all the scattered communities along the Nile into one great nation. This was the seed of an empire that would endure for thousands of years. But that story belongs to another chapter. For now, let us linger in these peaceful early days, when life was measured not by clocks, but by the height of the river, the position of the sun, and the changing of the seasons. Imagine yourself standing on the banks of the ancient Nile at daybreak. The air is crisp and clean, carrying the scent of water and earth. You feel the gentle warmth of the first rays of sunlight touching your skin. The water before you is mirror, smooth, reflecting the soft colors of dawn, pink and gold and purple streaking across the sky. You hear the gentle lapping of water against the shore, the soft call of birds waking in the reeds, the distant sound of someone singing as they begin their daily work. This is a world at peace with itself, where people understood their place in the grand design of creation. The Nile was more than just a river to these ancient people. It was their lifeline, their calendar, their compass, and their connection to the divine. Every birth was celebrated by its waters. Every harvest was a gift from its floods. Every prayer was offered in gratitude for its abundance. As you stand there in your imagination, watching the sun climb higher and the world wake up around you, you can feel the deep contentment that comes from living in harmony with nature. There's no rush, no urgency, no anxiety about tomorrow. There's only this moment, this place, this feeling of being exactly where you belong. The people around you move with purpose, but without haste. A mother calls her children in for breakfast. An old man repairs his fishing net with patient, practiced hands. Young people laugh as they walk to the fields, carrying tools that their grandparents used before them. This is the world that gave birth to writing and mathematics, to medicine and astronomy, to art and architecture that still inspire us today. But before all those great achievements, there was simply this: people living good lives beside a great river, finding meaning in their daily work and joy in their families and communities. Let this peaceful scene fill your mind. Now, as you prepare for sleep, feel the gentle warmth of that ancient sun, hear the soft sounds of the river, smell the rich earth and clean air. You are safe and cared for, just as those ancient people were safe and cared for by the eternal flow of the Nile. The river continues to flow as it has for millions of years, carrying with it the dreams and hopes of countless generations. Tonight, let it carry you, too, into peaceful, restorative sleep, where your own dreams can flow as gently and as surely as the waters of the timeless Nile. Rest well, knowing that you are part of this great human story that began so long ago beside the waters of life. The same stars that watched over those ancient people are watching over you tonight. The same forces of love and creation that guided them are guiding you still. Sleep now, and let the ancient wisdom of the Nile carry you into Tum, the most peaceful of dreams. Settle back comfortably, and let your breathing become even deeper and more relaxed. Feel yourself drifting gently down the timeless Nile, where the waters are calm and the evening breeze carries the wisdom of ages. We leave behind the peaceful villages of early Egypt and journey forward through time to witness something remarkable, the birth of the world's first great kingdom, where vision and unity would shape a civilization that still captivates us today. Picture the ancient land as it was thousands of years ago, divided into two distinct worlds. yet bound together by the same life-giving river. In the south stretched Upper Egypt, a narrow ribbon of land flanked by towering cliffs and deep valleys. The people here were proud and steadfast, their traditions as enduring as the stone that surrounded them. They wore the tall white crown of the south, and their cities stood firm against the desert winds like sentinels watching over the Nile. To the north lay Lower Egypt, where the great river spread into a vast, fertile delta. Here the land was broad and green, rich with marshlands and swaying reeds. The people moved with the fluid rhythm of water and wind, their ways more open and adaptable, shaped by their connection to the Mediterranean world beyond. They wore the distinctive red crown of the north, and their communities flourished in the abundance of the delta. For countless generations, these two lands existed as neighbors, sometimes trading in friendship, sometimes competing for resources, but always connected by the river that flowed as one continuous lifeline through both their territories. It seemed natural that eventually these two peoples would become one. That destiny found its voice in a remarkable leader whose name echoes through history. Narmer, though some traditions remember him as Menes, he was not the first to dream of a unified Egypt, but he possessed the vision, courage, and wisdom to transform that dream into reality. Narmer was both warrior and statesman, understanding that true unity could not be achieved through conquest alone. His campaign to bring the northern kingdom under southern rule was as much about ceremonial marriage as military victory, a sacred joining of lands, traditions, and spiritual beliefs. When Narmer achieved his goal, he did something unprecedented. In human history, he wore both crowns, the red and the white, merged together into the magnificent double crown known as the Picent. This powerful symbol represented not the domination of one land over another, but the harmonious unity of the two lands as one people. We can still see Narmer depicted on an ancient stone tablet called the Narmer Palette. There he stands, tall and regal, holding the symbols of his authority, not as a conqueror, but as the bringer of order to a world ready for unity. His image radiates the quiet confidence of a leader who understood that his role was to serve something greater than himself. With unity achieved, Narmer faced the monumental task of creating a government that could hold his vast new kingdom together. He established his capital at a strategic location called En-eb-Hedj, meaning the White Walls, which later generations would know as Memphis. This city stood at the natural crossroads between Upper and Lower Egypt, a perfect symbol of the new unified nation. Here, in this first great capital, Narmer built temples where the gods could be properly honored, grain silos to ensure his people would never go hungry, and administrative buildings where the complex work of governing could be carried out. This was the birth of centralized government, a revolutionary concept that was entirely new to the world. The king appointed trusted officials to oversee the vital irrigation systems that controlled the Nile's floods, to measure water levels and predict harvests, and to collect taxes in grain that would support the kingdom's growing infrastructure. Most importantly, he created a class of educated scribes-learned individuals who would record everything from harvest yields to religious offerings to the official chronicles of the royal dynasties. The writing system they used was far more than simple record-keeping. The Egyptians called it Medu Neter, the words of the gods, and we know it today as hieroglyphs. These beautiful symbols were considered sacred, each one carrying the power of divine speech. Every word carved into a temple wall or painted onto. Papyrus was believed to be an echo of the god's own will, making the scribes not just administrators but priests of the written word. With political unity came something even more profound, a shared sense of identity. For the first time, people began to think of themselves not as members of scattered tribes or isolated villages, but as Egyptians, one people bound by their river, guided by their king, and protected by their gods. And that king, he was no ordinary ruler. In the minds of his people, the Pharaoh had become divine, the living embodiment of Horus, the magnificent falcon god of kingship in the sky. Later traditions would proclaim him the son of Re, the powerful sun god who brought light and life to the world. This divine status brought with it an enormous responsibility. The Pharaoh wasn't simply maintaining laws and collecting taxes. He was keeping the entire universe in proper balance. His sacred duty was to uphold Mat, the cosmic principle of truth, justice, and harmony that the Egyptians believed held all creation together. When Mat was strong and the Pharaoh fulfilled his divine role properly, the Nile's floods would arrive exactly when needed. The crops would grow tall and golden, and the people would prosper in peace. But when Mat was disturbed or neglected, chaos could creep into the world, bringing drought, famine, or disorder. Every decision the king made, every temple he commissioned, every ritual he performed was part of this grand sacred contract with the forces of creation. This belief transformed Egyptian kingship from mere political power into a profound spiritual calling. Thus began what historians call the Old Kingdom, the first great flowering of Egyptian civilization. No longer content with buildings of reeds and mud brick, the Egyptians began constructing temples from stone, setting them on foundations designed to last for eternity. Villages grew into towns, towns expanded into magnificent cities, and the very landscape began to reflect the grandeur of this unified kingdom. The tombs of the wealthy and powerful also began to grow larger and more elaborate, because for the Egyptians, death was never an ending, but rather a transformation, a journey to the Duat, the mysterious realm of the dead, where the soul would be judged by the gods, and, if found worthy, granted the gift of eternal life. The Pharaohs, as divine beings, could not leave such an important journey to chance. Their tombs had to be perfect sanctuaries, sealed against time and the elements, adorned with sacred text to guide their passage, and filled with all the treasures and tools they would need in the afterlife. Yet this was still just the beginning. The age of the great pyramids, those impossible monuments that still take our breath away, lay ahead in the future. For now we rest at this moment of transition, when a people were discovering their true potential and writing the opening chapters of a story that would span thousands of years. Close your eyes and let yourself drift back to that ancient world. Feel the warm Egyptian sun on your face as you stand in the bustling streets of Memphis. Hear the gentle chanting of priests in the temples. Smell the sweet incense rising from sacred altars, and listen to the rhythmic sounds of stonecutters and builders working to create monuments for eternity. This was a civilization discovering its identity, a people bold enough to believe they could build something permanent in an impermanent world. They stood at the threshold of greatness and found the courage to step through into immortality. As you prepare for sleep tonight, let the waters of the ancient Nile carry you gently forward toward dreams of monuments yet to be built, toward visions of a legacy that would indeed touch the stars. Rest peacefully in the knowledge that you, too, are part of this great human story of aspiration, achievement, and the eternal search for meaning. You are safe, you are calm, and your mind is floating in the serene stillness of that first kingdom, where time was just beginning to be measured in dynasties and monuments, and where every night held the promise of eternity. Let your breathing deepen even further. Feel yourself floating gently through time, carried by the warm desert winds of ancient Egypt. The unified kingdom has found its rhythm, and now we witness humanity's first attempt to build something eternal. As the early dynasties settled into their reign over the unified two lands, something extraordinary began to stir in the hearts and minds of the Egyptian people. It was a dream that would literally reshape the landscape. Forever's dream of conquering death itself through monuments that would stand until the end of time. This dream found its first true expression during the reign of a pharaoh whose name still whispers through the desert wains, Djoser, the second king of the third dynasty. Djoser was blessed with something every great leader needs: a visionary advisor. His name was Imhotep, and he was perhaps the first true genius known to history. Physician, architect, priest, and engineer, all in one remarkable man. Picture the royal court at Memphis, where Djoser and Imhotep spent countless hours discussing how to create a tomb worthy of a divine pharaoh. Traditional burial sites were simple mastabas, low, rectangular structures of mud brick that barely rose above the desert floor. But Djoser dreamed of something that would reach toward the heavens themselves, something that would announce to all who saw it that here lay a god-king. Imhotep's solution was revolutionary. At Saqqara, just south of Memphis, he began construction of something the world had never seen: a step pyramid. Imagine the wonder of the workers as, layer by layer, stone upon stone, the structure rose higher than any building ever conceived. 6 massive steps, each one smaller than the one below, climbing toward the sky like a stairway for the pharaoh's soul to ascend to the gods. But this pyramid was not built in a day, or even in a year. Stone by massive stone, each block weighing as much as 15 men, teams of skilled craftsmen, carved and shaped and fitted with a precision that still amazes us today. They worked in the gentle rhythm of the seasons during the flood months when farming was impossible, and the entire kingdom could turn its attention to this monumental project. The step pyramid of Djoser stands today, nearly 5,000 years later, its ancient stones still defying time and weather. When you see it rising from the desert sands, weathered but unbroken, you can almost hear the voices of those ancient workers singing as they labored under the Egyptian sun, building something they knew would outlast their great-grandchildren. But Djoser's pyramid was only the beginning. The idea had been born, and now it would grow and evolve with each passing reign. The next great pyramid builder was Pharaoh Sneferu, a king whose ambition matched his engineering curiosity. Sneferu didn't just want to build one pyramid. He wanted to perfect the art itself. At Tashar, he began construction of what we now call the bent pyramid. And here we can see the learning process of ancient engineering in action. The pyramid began with sides angled at a steep 54 degrees, reaching boldly toward the sky. But partway through construction, something went wrong. Perhaps the foundation shifted, or perhaps the engineers realized the angle was too steep for stability. Whatever the reason, they made a remarkable decision. They changed the angle to a gentler 43 degrees, creating a pyramid that appears to bend in the middle. Rather than see this as a failure, Sneferu learned from it. His next pyramid, the Red Pyramid, was built with a gentler angle from the very beginning, creating the first true smooth-sided pyramid in history. Stand beside the Red Pyramid today, and you can feel the confidence of its builders. This was a structure designed to last forever, and it shows in every perfectly fitted stone. But all of these achievements were mere preparation for what was to come. For it was Sneferu's son who would create the most famous monument in human history. His name was Khufu, though the Greeks would later call him Cheops. And his pyramid at Giza would become one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the only one still standing today. Imagine the planning that went into the Great Pyramid. This was not just a tomb, but a precisely engineered marvel that would cover 13 acres at its base and rise nearly 500 feet into the sky. Every measurement was calculated with astronomical precision, its sides aligned perfectly with the cardinal directions, its passages angled to point toward specific stars that the ancient Egyptians believed would guide the pharaoh's soul to its eternal home. For over 20 years, the work continued. During the flood season each year, when the Nile rose and farming was impossible, as many as 20,000 workers would converge on the Giza Plateau. These were not slaves, as Hollywood would have us believe, but skilled craftsmen, engineers, and laborers who were well fed and proud of their work. They lived in workers' villages nearby, their children playing in the shadows of the growing monument. Picture the scene as the sun rises over the eastern desert, painting the limestone blocks golden and pink. Teams of workers are already at their stations, some quarrying fresh stone from nearby outcrops, others dragging massive blocks up wooden ramps that spiral around the growing pyramid like a giant staircase. The air fills with the sound of chisels on stone, the creak of wooden rollers, and the rhythmic chants of work gangs coordinating their efforts. The precision of their work was extraordinary. The base of the Great Pyramid is level 2 within just 2 centimeters. The blocks fit together so perfectly that you cannot slide a knife blade between them. This was craftsmanship elevated to the level of worship, each stone placed as an offering to eternity itself. But Khufu's pyramid would not stand alone. His successors, Khafre and Menkaure, would build their own pyramids nearby, creating the magnificent complex we know today as the Pyramids of Giza. Khafre also commissioned the Great Sphinx, that mysterious guardian with a human head and lions, body carved from a single massive outcrop of limestone and positioned to gaze eternally toward the rising sun. These pyramids were far more than tombs. They were resurrection machines, designed according to the ancient Egyptians' sophisticated beliefs about death and the afterlife. The pharaoh's body, carefully mummified and wrapped in linen, would be placed in a chamber deep within the pyramid, surrounded by everything he would need for his journey through the Duat, the mysterious realm of the dead. The walls of these burial Chambers were covered with hieroglyphic texts called the pyramid texts, some of the oldest religious writings in human history. These were not just decorations, but powerful spells designed to help the pharaoh's soul navigate the dangers of the afterlife and achieve union with the gods. "The sky weeps for you," reads one beautiful passage. "The earth trembles for you, the imperishable stars await you." Another promises, "You shall ascend to the sky as a falcon. Your wings are those of a great falcon." These words were carved in stone with the absolute belief that they held the power to grant eternal life. But the pyramids represented something even more profound than individual immortality. They were expressions of a civilization at the height of its confidence and creativity, a people who believed they could build bridges between earth and heaven, between the mortal and the divine. The workers who built these monuments were supported by an entire economy dedicated to the afterlife. Priests maintained daily rituals at pyramid temples, offering food and incense to nourish the pharaoh's spirit. Farmers worked estates specifically designated to provide for these eternal needs. Artists and craftsmen created beautiful objects to accompany the king into eternity. This was the Old Kingdom at its zenith, a time when Egyptians believed they had solved the greatest puzzle of human existence: how to defeat death itself. Their confidence was reflected not just in their monuments, but in their art, their literature, and their entire way of life. The Pyramid Age represents humanity's first great flowering of engineering and artistic achievement, a time when people dared to think beyond the limits of their individual lifespans and work towards something truly eternal. When you stand before the Great Pyramid today, you are looking at humanity's first successful attempt to build forever as our journey through. The Old Kingdom draws to a close. Imagine yourself standing on the Giza Plateau as the sun sets behind the three great pyramids. The limestone glows with a warm golden light, and the desert wind carries with it the whispers of ages past. You can almost see the ancient workers heading home after another day's labor, tired but satisfied, knowing they were part of something magnificent. The Sphinx gazes into the distance with that enigmatic smile, keeping its secrets as it has for thousands of years. The pyramids stand like mountains made by human hands, their perfect geometric forms a testament to the power of human imagination and determination. This was a time when people believed in forever, and they built accordingly. Their monuments still stand, still inspire wonder, still connect us to the dreams and aspirations of our ancient ancestors who dared to reach for immortality and, in their own way, achieved it. Rest now in the shadow of these eternal monuments, knowing that the same human spirit that conceived and built these wonders lives on in you. Let the ancient stones and the desert wind carry you into peaceful sleep, where your own dreams can be as bold and as lasting as the pyramids themselves. You are safe beneath the starry sky that the pyramid builders knew so well, protected by monuments that have watched over the desert for nearly 5,000 years, and your rest is as eternal and as peaceful as the pharaohs who dreamed of living forever. Let your mind drift deeper into the ancient world. Feel the warm desert breeze carrying the scent of frankincense and myrrh. As the great pyramids stand eternal against the starlit sky, we turn our attention to the souls and spirits of the people who created this magnificent civilization. While the pharaohs built monuments that touched the heavens, the true magic of ancient Egypt lived in the hearts and minds of its people, in their beliefs, their art, their daily rituals, and their profound understanding of the sacred mysteries that surrounded them. At the very heart of Egyptian civilization was something the people called Medu Netjer, the words of the gods. We know it today as hieroglyphic writing, but to the ancient Egyptians, these beautiful symbols were far more than mere letters or words. Each hieroglyph was believed to contain divine power, each inscription a prayer made visible, each text a bridge between the world of mortals and the realm of the gods. Picture a young scribe in training, sitting cross-legged in the cool shade of a temple courtyard, carefully practicing his letters on a smooth piece of limestone. His teacher, an elderly priest with patient eyes, guides his hand as he learns to draw the sacred symbols: the eye of Horus for protection, the Ankh for life, the feather of Mat for truth and justice. Remember, the old teacher whispers, you are not simply making marks on stone. You are speaking the language that the gods themselves used to create the world. Each symbol carries the breath of divinity. Write with reverence, for your words will outlast your body and perhaps your name. This writing system was a marvel of both practicality and spirituality. The Egyptians could write the same word in several different ways, using picture symbols that represented the actual object, sound symbols that represented pronunciation, or meaning symbols that conveyed abstract concepts. A single hieroglyphic text might tell a story, record a historical event, preserve a prayer, or provide instructions for the afterlife, all while creating patterns of visual beauty that pleased both gods and humans. But the true soul of Egyptian civilization lived, and their remarkable understanding of the divine world that surrounded them. The Egyptians saw gods everywhere in the rising sun, the flowing river, the growing grain, the desert wind, and the flight of birds across the sky. Ra, the mighty sun god, sailed across the heavens each day in his golden solar boat, bringing light and warmth to the world below. Each dawn was his birth, each noon his triumph, each sunset his death, and journey through the underworld to be reborn again. The Egyptians would wake each morning and greet Re with prayers and offerings, knowing that their devotion helped sustain the cosmic order that kept the world turning. Along the life-giving Nile, they honored Khnum, the ram-headed god who shaped human beings on his divine potter's wheel, breathing life into clay with infinite care and wisdom. Sobek, the crocodile god, ruled over the dangerous but necessary power of the river's floods, reminding people that nature's gifts always came with the need for respect and caution. But perhaps no story captured the Egyptian heart more deeply than the tale of Osiris, Isis, and their eternal love that conquered even death itself. Osiris was the beloved king who brought civilization to Egypt, teaching people how to farm, how to make bread and wine, how to worship the gods with proper rituals. He ruled with wisdom and compassion until his jealous brother Set, consumed by envy and rage, murdered him and scattered his body across the land. Isis, the devoted wife whose love knew no bounds, searched throughout Egypt until she found every piece of her husband's body. With her powerful magic and unwavering determination, she brought Osiris back to life long enough for them to conceive a son, Horus, who would grow up to avenge his father and reclaim the throne of Egypt. Though Osiris could not remain in the world of the living, he became the eternal king of the dead, the compassionate judge who would welcome the souls of the righteous into the blessed afterlife. This beautiful story taught the Egyptians that love was stronger than death, that justice would always triumph over evil, and that every ending contained within it the seeds of a new beginning. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification, played a crucial role in preparing the dead for their journey to Osiris. With infinite patience and skill, Anubis guided the priests in the sacred art of preserving the body, wrapping it in fine linen, and placing protective amulets that would guard the soul through its trials in the afterlife. The process of mummification was itself a profound spiritual ritual that could take 70 days to complete. The body was carefully cleaned and purified, the organs removed and preserved in special canopic jars watched over by protective deities. The heart, believed to be the seat of wisdom and emotion, was usually left in place, for it would be needed. When the soul stood before Osiris for judgment, during the wrapping process, priests would recite prayers and spells, carefully placing amulets between the layers of linen scarab beetles for rebirth, jade pillars for stability, tayet knots for protection. Each step was performed with reverence and precision, transforming the deceased into a being capable of eternal life. But Egyptian religion was not all solemn ritual and preparation for death. Their festivals were joyous celebrations that brought entire communities together in worship, music, dancing, and feasting. During the beautiful festival of Opet, the sacred bark of Amun would be carried from Karnak to Luxor Temple in a procession filled with singing, drumming, and the sweet scent of burning incense. People would line the processional route, offering flowers and prayers, sharing food and drink, and celebrating the renewal of the Pharaoh's divine power. Children would run alongside the procession, their laughter mixing with the sacred chants, while musicians played on harps, flutes, and sistrums the sacred rattles that pleased the gods with their gentle, rhythmic sound. The Egyptians believed that the gods delighted in human joy just as much as human devotion. Their temples were not gloomy places of fear, but houses of beauty where the divine and mortal worlds met in harmony. Temple walls were covered with colorful paintings and reliefs showing gods and humans sharing meals, exchanging gifts, and working together to maintain the cosmic order. Artists and craftsmen held a special place in this divine scheme, for they were the ones who made the invisible world visible, who gave form to the gods and made their stories accessible to all people. Whether carving relief sculptures in temple walls, painting tomb chambers with scenes of eternal life, or creating beautiful jewelry and furniture for both the living and the dead, these skilled workers understood that their art served a sacred purpose. The famous bust of Queen Nefertiti, with its perfect proportions and serene expression, was not created merely to show physical beauty, but to capture the divine essence that made her a suitable partner for a pharaoh. The golden treasures found in Tutankhamun's tomb were not just displays of wealth, but carefully crafted tools for navigating the afterlife, each piece imbued with protective spells and symbolic meaning. Even in their daily lives, ordinary Egyptians lived surrounded by sacred symbols and protective magic. They wore amulets to guard against illness and misfortune, painted their eyes with kohl that had both cosmetic and spiritual purposes, and decorated their homes with images of protective deities like Bes, the cheerful dwarf god who watched over families and children. Women would wear amulets of Tauret, the hippo goddess who protected mothers and babies during childbirth. Farmers would place small statues of protective deities in their fields to ensure good harvests. Even simple household objects like furniture and pottery were often decorated with sacred symbols that invited divine blessing into everyday life. The Egyptians understood something profound about the relationship between beauty and spirituality. They believed that creating beautiful things was itself a form of worship, that surrounding themselves with harmony and proportion helped maintain the cosmic order that kept chaos at bay. Their art followed strict conventions, not because they lacked creativity, but because they believed these forms had been revealed by the gods themselves and therefore possessed divine power. The way they drew human figures, with heads in profile but eyes facing forward, was not primitive representation, but sacred geometry designed to capture the eternal essence of the person rather than just their temporary physical appearance. As evening falls over our journey through Egyptian culture and religion, imagine yourself in an ancient temple as the day's final prayers are offered. The setting sun streams through the sanctuary windows, painting the walls with golden light. Priests move quietly through the sacred spaces, lighting oil lamps and burning incense, their soft chants creating a peaceful atmosphere of devotion and reverence. The air is filled with a gentle scent of frankincense and myrrh, the same precious resins that were offered to the gods thousands of years ago. You can hear the distant sound of the Nile flowing past the temple walls, that eternal rhythm that marked time for countless generations of Egyptians who found meaning and purpose in their rich spiritual traditions. This was a civilization that understood that life was sacred, that death was not an ending, but a transformation, and that human beings were partners with the gods in maintaining the beauty and order of creation. Their beliefs gave them comfort in times of trouble, purpose in their daily work, and hope for eternal life in a realm where love and justice would reign forever. Rest now in the peaceful knowledge that the same stars that guided the ancient Egyptians in their spiritual journey are shining above you tonight. Let their timeless wisdom about love, beauty, and the sacred nature of existence carry you into dreams as eternal and as meaningful as the beliefs that sustained one of history's greatest civilizations. You are safe in the embrace of this ancient wisdom, protected by the same divine forces that the Egyptians knew and trusted, and your sleep will be as deep and as restorative as the sacred rest that prepared their souls for the eternal journey ahead. Take a deep, comfortable breath after the great pyramids had been built, after the glory of the old kingdom had faded like sunset over the desert sands. Egypt had endured a time of darkness. Sandstorms had blown across the land, dynasties had crumbled, and in the quiet of the long night, the country waited for a new dawn. Around 2055 BC, from the distant southern city of Thebes, a new light began to flicker. Let your mind drift southward now along the gentle curves of the Nile, past Memphis, past the great pyramids sleeping in moonlight, a place where the river bends like a loving embrace. There, nestled between golden cliffs and emerald fields, lay Kai, the city of Thebes. Mentuhotep II, his name, means the god Montu is satisfied, and perhaps the gods truly were pleased with this remarkable man. He was not born to greatness. His family ruled only a small portion of southern Egypt, but sometimes the gentlest souls carry the strongest hearts. Picture him as a young prince walking along the riverbank at dawn, watching fishermen cast their nets, listening to the morning prayers drifting from small temples. He saw a divided land and dreamed of wholeness. In the sacred precinct of Karnak, where massive columns would one day reach toward heaven, Mentuhotep knelt before the god Amun. Amun-Wo's name means the hidden one, the breath of life that moves through all things. The priests whispered ancient prophecies that from Thebes would come the salvation of Egypt, and slowly, like the dawn creeping across desert sands, Mentuhotep began to believe. He was not a conqueror in the harsh sense. He was more like a physician healing a wounded nation. When he marched north to challenge the rival kings, he carried with him not just soldiers, but scribes, artists, builders, dreamers. City after city opened their gates, not from fear, but from hope. The people remembered what it felt like to be one nation, under one caring ruler, under one protective sky. At Deir el-Bahari, against the towering cliffs of the west bank, Mentuhotep built his mortuary temple. It was unlike anything Egypt had ever seen. Terraced gardens cascading down the rock face like a waterfall of stone and flowers. Even today, if you visit that sacred place, you can feel his presence, his dream of beauty rising from chaos, his vision of an Egypt reborn. The reunification was complete. Upper and Lower Egypt breathed as one, and from the temples of Thebes prayers of thanksgiving rose into the star-filled night. Now settle deeper into comfort as we enter one of history's most beautiful chapters, a time when wisdom ruled over war, when pharaohs were shepherds of their people. Amenhotep I, Amun is in front, was a man of humble origins who understood the weight of a crown. He had served as a vizier, the highest official under the pharaoh. He had seen how power could corrupt or heal. When he ascended the throne around 1991 B.C., he made a promise, whispered in the sanctuary of Amun, that he would rule not as a god but as a servant of his people. Picture the Egypt of his time. Farmers waking before dawn, their faces lit by oil lamps, they prepared to tend fields that stretched like green carpets beside the Nile. The annual flood had been generous. The granaries were full, and children played safely in village squares. Amenhotep established a new capital, Ich-Toi, Caesar of the two lands strategically placed between north and south. A city of white limestone and flowering gardens where representatives from every province came to seek justice. But perhaps his greatest gift to Egypt was teaching his son, Sesostris I, the art of compassionate leadership. Father and son ruled together for 10 years, sharing the throne, sharing wisdom like two gentle hands guiding one plow. Sesostris I, whose name meant she of powerful men, was perhaps the greatest pharaoh of the Middle Kingdom, tall and strong with eyes that reflected both kindness and determination. He was a builder of dreams. In the quarries of Aswan, workers sang as they carved red granite destined for temples and monuments. The sound of their chisels rang like music across the water, for they knew they were creating beauty that would last forever. At Karnak, Sesostris raised the first pillared hall columns like stone trees reaching toward heaven. Their capitals bloomed with lotus and papyrus, symbols of the unified land, and the dancing shadows between these columns Priests offered daily prayers for the prosperity of all Egypt. He sent expeditions south into Nubia, not as conquerors, but as traders and diplomats. Gold and ivory flowed north, while Egyptian knowledge and craftsmanship flowed south. The ancient world was becoming one family. The literature of this golden age speaks to us across the centuries. The prophecy of Nefertiti tells of a land where truth shall return to its place, having driven out falsehood. The tale of Senna, perhaps the world's first great novel, tells of a man in exile, longing for home. It's a story that touches every heart that has ever missed the place where it belongs. Under Sesostris III, the last great pharaoh of this dynasty, Egypt's borders were secure. Art flourished like flowers after rain, and common people lived lives of dignity and purpose. The pharaohs' own words carved in stone at the fortress of Semna still speak to us today. I have made my boundary further south than my father's. He who shall maintain it, he is my son, but he who shall abandon it, he is not my son. It was not the boast of a conqueror, but the careful wisdom of a guardian, protecting all he held dear. But as with all things in life, nothing lasts forever toward the end of the middle. Strange winds began to blow from the east. Strangers appeared at the borders with horse-drawn chariots the Egyptians had never seen. The last pharaohs of the 12th dynasty were like candles burning low, their power gradually fading, and in the growing shadows a new force was preparing. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, change arrives on silent feet, bringing gifts we never expected, wrapped in packages we don't recognize. Around 1650 BC, as the strength of the Middle Kingdom pharaohs began to wane like the setting sun, strangers appeared. In the fertile Delta region, they came not as an army, but as families, carrying children and dreams, seeking new homes in the rich lands of Egypt. The Egyptians called them Hyksos, rulers of foreign lands, which later became Hyksos. But they were not the destroyers that later Egyptian propaganda would claim. They were wanderers, much like the Hebrew families who would come later, seeking refuge and opportunity. These were the children of Canaan, from the lands where Abraham had walked, where cities like Damascus and Jerusalem were already ancient. They brought with them technologies that would transform Egypt forever. Picture their arrival. Dust clouds on the horizon, revealing not chariots of war, but families with ox carts, women carrying babies, men leading flocks of sheep and goats, elders with eyes full of stories from distant lands. The horses they brought, magnificent creatures with flowing manes, had never been seen in Egypt. The Egyptians had used donkeys for thousands of years, but these powerful animals could pull swift chariots, turning the wheel of history. Their composite bows, made of wood and horn and sinew, could shoot arrows twice as far as Egyptian bows. Their bronze weapons were sharper and stronger. Their knowledge of fortification was centuries ahead. At Avaris, in the eastern delta, they established their capital. It became a city unlike any other in Egypt, a place where Canaanite gods stood beside Egyptian deities, where Syrian merchants bargained with Nubian traders, where new ideas bloomed like lotus flowers in spring. The Hyksos pharaohs, men with names like Kian and Apophis, adopted Egyptian customs, wore the double crown, wrote their names in hieroglyphs. They didn't destroy Egyptian civilization, they embraced it, and added their own threads to its magnificent tapestry. For over a century they ruled northern Egypt, while Egyptian pharaohs continued to govern the south from Thebes. It was not the catastrophe that some would later claim, but a time of cultural exchange, of learning, of growth. The Hyksos taught the Egyptians about horses and chariots, about new methods of warfare and diplomacy, about the wider world beyond the Nile Valley. In return, they learned the ancient wisdom of the pharaohs, the art of governing a great nation, the secrets of eternal life carved in temple walls. And in Thebes, the southern pharaohs watched and learned and quietly prepared, for they knew that every winter is followed by spring-givery, night by dawn, and every period of change by a new awakening. The stage was being set for the greatest age Egypt would ever know. Rest peacefully now, knowing that even in times of uncertainty, wisdom finds. Awake cultures blend like rivers meeting the sea, and from every ending comes a new beginning. And so in history's slumber, Egypt learned that sometimes changes, however frightening they may seem, are actually preparations for an even greater awakening. Rest now, as the river Nile continues to flow peacefully through the night, for tomorrow a new age will begin. Breathe deeply and let yourself drift back in time, from the sacred city of Thebes. Around 1550 BC, a young pharaoh named Moses awakened to his destiny. Like the first ray of dawn breaking over the eastern desert, he would bring light back to Egypt. Moses was not a warrior by nature, but sometimes gentle souls must become fierce to protect what they love. He gathered the scattered forces of Egypt like a shepherd calling his flock home. The siege of Avaris, the Hyksos capital, lasted many seasons, but Moses was patient as the Nile waiting for the flood. And when the foreign rulers finally departed, they left behind their knowledge, their horses, their bronze weapons, gifts that would make Egypt stronger than ever before. Egypt was free, and with freedom came a hunger not for conquest, but for understanding the wider world. Rest your mind and imagine the most remarkable woman of the ancient world, Hatshepsut, whose name means foremost of noble women. She was meant to be regent for her young stepson, but destiny had larger plans. Picture her standing in the great temple at Karnak, wearing the false beard of kingship, not out of vanity, but because sometimes to change the world, we must challenge what people expect. For 22 peaceful years she ruled Egypt with wisdom. She sent trading expeditions to the mysterious land of Punt, bringing back frankincense trees, baboons, and gold. Her architects carved her story into the walls of Deir el-Bahari, a temple that seems to grow from the living rock itself. They called her the most successful pharaoh who ever lived, not because she conquered nations, but because she built prosperity. Trade flourished, art bloomed like lotus flowers, and Egypt knew peace. When young Thutmose finally took the throne, he had learned much from his stepmother's wisdom, but he carried the heart of a lion. 17 military campaigns, they say, but do not picture brutal warfare. Think instead of a master strategist who understood that true strength comes from respect, not fear. At the Battle of Megiddo, he could have destroyed his enemies, but instead he showed mercy. He brought defeated princes to Egypt, not as slaves, but as students. Their children learned Egyptian ways and returned home as friends. His empire stretched from the Fourth Cataract in Nubia to the Euphrates River, but unlike other conquerors, Thutmose built roads, established trade routes, and created a network of allies that would last for centuries. Now let your mind drift to one of history's most fascinating couples. Akhenaten, originally called Amenhotep IV, was a pharaoh who dared to dream differently. Imagine him tall and slender with a face unlike any other pharaoh, walking hand in hand with the most beautiful woman in the ancient world, Nefertiti. Together they built a new city in the desert Akhenaten horizon of the sun, a place dedicated to one god, the Aten, the sun disk that gave life to all Dot. Picture their family's 6 daughters playing in sun-drenched courtyards, art that showed real emotions, real love, instead of stiff royal poses. For a brief moment, Egypt glimpsed a different way of being. Their revolution lasted only 17 years, like a beautiful flower that blooms brilliantly but briefly. When Akhenaten died, the old ways returned, but their love story, captured in stone, still whispers to us across the centuries. Breathe slowly and think of a 9-year-old boy suddenly thrust onto the most powerful throne in the world. Tutankhamun, probably Akhenaten's son, though we may never know for certain. He ruled for only 10 years, dying at 19, too young to leave his mark on history. And yet, in 1922, when Howard Carter first peered into his tomb by the light of a candle and saw wonderful things, Tutankhamun became the most famous pharaoh of all, his golden mask perfect and eternal reminds us that sometimes the smallest lives shine the brightest. His tomb, almost intact, was like a time capsule, showing us how these ancient people lived, loved, and hoped for immortality. After the turmoil of the Amarna period, Egypt needed a steady hand. Seti I, whose name means of Seth, was like a skilled gardener, carefully tending the kingdom back to health. He restored the old temples, re-established Egypt's borders, and most importantly, he was a father who prepared his son for greatness. His tomb in the Valley of the Kings is perhaps the most beautiful ever carved, the ceiling painted with star maps, the walls telling the story of the sun's journey through the underworld, a place where earthly power meets eternal beauty. And then came the pharaoh who would define greatness for all time, Ramses II, who ruled for 66 years, almost a lifetime by ancient standards. He was already 30 when he took the throne, and he would live to be 90. Abu Simbel, his greatest monument, 4 colossal statues of himself, each 65 feet tall, sitting eternally beside the Nile, carved from the living rock. But look closer and you'll see something beautiful. Smaller statues of his beloved wife, Nefertari, standing beside his legs, showing that even the mightiest pharaoh knew he was nothing without love. The Battle of Kadesh, where he fought the Hittites, could have been his greatest triumph. Instead, it taught him something more valuable, that peace is harder to achieve than victory, but infinitely more rewarding. The treaty he signed with the Hittite king, carved in silver, was the world's first peace agreement. A lesson that rings true even today, that former enemies can become friends. He built more temples, statues, and monuments than any pharaoh, before or after, but his greatest achievement was not made of stone. It was the stability he gave to Egypt, too. Generations grew up knowing only peace and prosperity under his reign. These were the pharaohs of Egypt's golden age, each one different, each one remarkable in their own way. Hatshepsut taught us that leadership knows no gender. Thutmose showed us that strength and mercy can walk together. Akhenaten dared to dream of something new. Tutankhamun reminds us that every life has value, and Ramses proved that true greatness lies not in conquest, but in what you build for those who come after. Rest now as the desert wind carries their stories across the sand. These voices from the past still have much to teach us about courage, about love, and about the dreams that make us human. Let their wisdom guide you into peaceful sleep. Let your breathing slow and step into an ordinary morning 3,000 years ago. The sun rises over the Nile just as it does today, painting the water gold and amber. A fisherman pushes his papyrus boat into the gentle current, his movements practiced and peaceful as his father taught him, and his father's father before that. In the village, smoke begins to curl from clay ovens. The baker's wife kneads bread dough, the same recipe her grandmother used, barley and emmer wheat ground by hand on stone querns. The smell of fresh bread mingles with the morning air, a comfort that transcends time. A farmer walks to his fields, checking the irrigation channels, touching the dark, rich soil that the Nile has blessed. His children follow behind, learning the ancient rhythms of planting and harvest, the eternal dance between human hands and fertile earth. Picture a workshop where sunlight streams through high windows, illuminating hands that create beauty from simple materials. The potter sits at his wheel, feet working the treadle, hands guiding clay into graceful vessels. Some will hold grain, others precious oils, each one shaped with the care of someone who knows their work will outlast their own lifetime. Nearby, a carpenter measures cedar wood brought from distant Lebanon. His tools, surprisingly modern in design, include a saw, a chisel, and adze for smoothing. He's crafting a chair for a merchant's house, legs carved like lotus stems, a seat that will welcome tired bodies for generations. In the jeweler's corner, gold catches the light. Delicate chains, scarab amulets, rings that will grace the fingers of both the wealthy and the humble. For in Egypt, beauty was not just for pharaohs, but for anyone who appreciated the divine spark in well-made things. These craftsmen lived in neighborhoods, raised families worried about their children's futures, laughed with friends over evening meals. They were not so different from us, finding meaning in work well done, pride and skills passed down through generations. Breathe softly and listen to the sound of children's laughter echoing across the centuries. Egyptian children played many of the same games children play today. They had toy boats, dolls with real hair, spinning tops, leather balls. Board games like Senate, the game of passing, where pieces moved across a board like souls journeying to the afterlife, but also simply like families enjoying an evening together. At sunrise, the children of scribes and officials walked to school, carrying wooden writing boards and reed pens. They learned to write hieroglyphs, starting with simple signs, a bird, a house, a loaf of bread. The teacher was patient but firm. The ear of a boy is on his back. He listens when he is beaten. They said, though perhaps with more humor than cruelty. Girls learned at home, but this was not limitation. It was inheritance. They learned to manage households, to weave linen fine as silk, to prepare medicines from herbs, to negotiate in the marketplace. Skills that gave them real power in a world that valued competence above all. In a world where women elsewhere had few rights, Egyptian women stood tall. A merchant's wife walks through the market, her linen dress crisp and white, her eyes outlined with kohl made from ground minerals. She conducts business in her own name, owns property, can divorce her husband. if he treats her poorly. In her hand a contract written on papyrus, proving she sold grain from her own fields. At home, she manages servants, plans meals, teaches her daughters. But she also reads, writes letters, perhaps even composes poetry. Education was not denied to her because of her gender. Wisdom, the Egyptians believed, could bloom in any heart. Some women became doctors, treating both male and female patients. Others managed estates, oversaw construction projects, served as priestesses in temples. They lived in a society that, for its time, offered remarkable equality, understanding that a nation is only as strong as all its people. Let your mind drift to a festival day when work stops and joy begins. The Opet Festival, when the statues of the gods journey from Karnak to Luxor. The whole city lines the processional way. Children on their fathers' shoulders, mothers holding babies up to see the golden barks. Musicians playing sistrums and drums, the rhythm matching the beating of 10,000 hearts. Beer flows freely, not the bitter drink of hard times, but sweet, honey-flavored, brewed especially for celebration. Bread is shared with strangers, dates and figs passed from hand to hand, because the gods, they believed, wanted their people to be happy. In the evening, families gather on rooftops, watching the Nile reflect the temple lights. Grandparents tell stories, young couples dance, and for a moment the concerns of daily life fade away, replaced by something larger, a sense of belonging to something eternal and good. In the end, what made life sweet for the ancient Egyptians were the same things that make life sweet for us. A cool breeze on a hot afternoon, the laughter of friends sharing a meal, the satisfaction of work completed, the comfort of home at day's end, a child's hand slipping into yours as you walk by the river. They wore linen because it was cool, ate bread and onions because they were nourishing, painted their eyes with kohl because it protected against the sun. Practical people who found ways to make practical things beautiful. These ordinary Egyptians, whose names we'll never know, lived lives full of the same hopes and dreams we carry today. They wanted their children to be healthy, their work to have meaning, their communities to be safe and prosperous. They looked up at the same stars we see, felt the same sun on their faces, worried about the future, cherished the past, and tried to make the most of the present moment they were given. In their daily lives, in their simple joys and common struggles, we see ourselves reflected across 3 millennia. A reminder that what makes us human, what connects us all, is not the grand monuments we build, but the quiet moments we share, the love we give, and the legacy of kindness we leave behind. Rest now, as the Nile still flows, as the sun still rises, as families still gather in the evening light. Some things never change, and that, perhaps, is the most comforting thought of all. Settle back comfortably and imagine Egypt as a great crossroads where the sands of Africa meet the waters of the Mediterranean. By the time of the New Kingdom, Egypt was no longer an isolated kingdom, but the center of a vast web of connections. Trade routes stretched like golden threads, north to the cedar forests of Lebanon, south to the gold mines of Nubia, east to the spice markets of Syria, and west to the olive groves of Libya. Picture harbor at Memphis in the early morning light. Ships arrive with their sails full of foreign wind, their hulls heavy with treasures from distant lands. Merchants from far-off kingdoms walk Egyptian streets, their clothing different, their languages strange, but their smiles universal. 4. Commerce the Egyptians learned was the first language of peace. In the great marketplace near the harbor, you can hear a dozen languages being spoken. A Mesopotamian trader argues good-naturedly with an Egyptian merchant over the price of lapis lazuli, that deep blue stone more precious than gold. Nearby, a Phoenician captain displays bolts of purple-dyed cloth, the color so rare it will clothe only kings and queens. Children gather around a Nubian storyteller, their eyes wide as he speaks of elephants and giraffes in lands where the Nile disappears into endless grasslands. These were not conquests, but conversations. Egypt was strong enough to be generous, confident enough to be curious. They welcomed foreign gods into their temples, foreign foods to their tables, and foreign ideas into their minds. In the temple kitchens, Egyptian cooks learned to prepare dishes seasoned with cinnamon from distant Ceylon and pepper from the mysterious lands of India. This was the wisdom of a mature civilization that understood strength comes not from isolation, but from connection. To the south, beyond the cataracts where the Nile runs wild over granite stones, lay the kingdom of Nubia, the land of gold. The relationship between Egypt and Nubia was complex, sometimes adversaries, sometimes allies, but always connected by the river they shared. Egyptian princes were sent to Nubian courts to learn diplomacy and warfare. Nubian princes came north to Egyptian schools to study mathematics and astronomy. Each learned from the other, creating bonds that went deeper than politics. In the fortress city of Bahan, at the Second Cataract, Egyptian and Nubian children played together in the dusty streets. Their games were the same, their laughter identical. Proof that the human heart recognizes no borders. Nubian archers served in Egyptian armies, their skills legendary throughout the ancient world. Their bows, made from African woods unknown in Egypt, could send arrows farther and truer than any other weapon of the age. In return, Egyptian craftsmen taught Nubian goldsmiths new techniques of working precious metals. Together they created jewelry so beautiful it adorned both pharaohs and Nubian kings. The gold collars worn by Egyptian nobles often bore Nubian designs, while Nubian royal regalia displayed Egyptian symbols of life and prosperity. In the temples of Abu Simbel, you can still see carved scenes of both peoples, Egyptian and Nubian, bringing gifts to the gods. The carved figures stand side by side, equal in dignity, equal in their devotion to the sacred. A reminder that strength comes not from domination, but from mutual respect, from recognizing that different cultures can create something beautiful together. Close your eyes and sail with Queen Hatshepsut's expedition to the fabled land of Nefertiti, Punt. Picture 5 sleek Egyptian ships cutting through the waters of the Red Sea, their crews singing ancient sailing songs to keep rhythm with their oars. The journey takes weeks, following the rocky coastline south, past coral reefs where dolphins play in the ship's wake. Nobody knows exactly where Punt was, perhaps modern-day Somalia or Ethiopia, or somewhere along the Red Sea coast where the desert meets the ocean. But to the Egyptians it was a place of wonder, God's land, where frankincense trees grew naturally and exotic animals lived in peaceful abundance. The expedition leader, a court official named Nehesi, kept careful records of everything he saw. Palm trees heavy with dates, villages built on stilts over tidal pools, people who painted their faces with beautiful patterns and wore gold rings in their ears. The Queen of Punt herself came to greet the Egyptian visitors, accompanied by servants, carrying gifts of welcome. The expedition returned with treasures that seemed like dreams made real. Living frankincense trees, their roots carefully wrapped in cloth and packed in baskets, would be planted in the temple gardens of Deir el-Bahari. Baboons and leopards walked on leashes through the streets of Thebes, wonder enough to draw crowds. From neighboring villages, ivory tusks and ebony wood, black as night and smooth as silk, would become furniture fit for gods and pharaohs. But most precious of all were the new friendships formed with people who lived so differently, yet shared the same human desires for beauty and prosperity. In the temple reliefs commemorating this expedition, Egyptian and Puntite figures embrace as equals, their faces showing genuine warmth and mutual respect. Let your mind travel now to one of history's most important moments, though it happened quietly in palace chambers lit by oil lamps, with the careful scratch of reed pens on precious silver tablets. For years, Egypt and the Hittite Empire had been rivals, two great powers circling each other like lions protecting their territories. The Battle of Kadesh had ended in stalemate, both sides claiming victory, but both sides knowing in their hearts that war solved nothing and cost everything. Ramses II, now older and wiser after decades of rule, received an ambassador from the Hittite king, Hattusili. Picture this historic meeting in the great audience hall at Ramesses. Sunlight streams through high windows, illuminating two men who had once been bitter enemies, but now sat across from each other, realizing they had more in common than they had supposed. Both were fathers who wanted their children to inherit a peaceful world. Both were rulers who understood that a strong neighbor was better than a weak enemy. The negotiations took months, with messages traveling back and forth between the two capitals. Scribes worked late into the night, translating between Egyptian hieroglyphs and Hittite cuneiform, ensuring that every word was precisely understood. The treaty they finally signed, carved in silver and stone, was revolutionary for its time. "Let there be peace and brotherhood between us forever," it declared in both languages. They promised to help each other against common enemies, to return refugees who sought sanctuary across their borders, to respect each other's territorial boundaries. They agreed to share intelligence about mutual threats and to coordinate their armies if either kingdom faced invasion. The world's first international peace agreement, written by men who had learned through bitter experience that true strength lies not in the ability to make war, but in the wisdom to make peace. To seal this friendship, Ramses married a Hittite princess in a ceremony celebrated in both kingdoms. The wedding procession stretched for miles as the princess traveled from her mountain homeland to the banks of the Nile. Egyptian and Hittite musicians played together, their different melodies, creating harmony. The marriage feast lasted for days, with dishes prepared in both Egyptian and Hittite styles, a delicious symbol of cultures blending in peace. From across the Mediterranean, on painted ships with curved prows and eyes painted on their hulls for protection, came traders from islands with names like music: Crete, Cyprus, Rhodes, islands where ancient civilizations had learned to live with the sea as their highway and fish as their companions. These Aegean sailors brought pottery painted with octopi and dolphins, There are ceramic artists capturing the movement of sea creatures with a grace that amazed Egyptian craftsmen. They carried bronze weapons forged in new ways, using techniques developed in the workshops of Knossos and Mycenae. Their ships' holds were filled with stories of distant cities built by the sea, where palaces rose in terraces overlooking harbors. Filled with ships from every corner of the known world, and Egyptian workshops along the Nile. Local craftsmen studied these foreign techniques with the careful attention of true artists. They adapted the Aegean spiral patterns, improved upon the bronze working methods, and created new styles that belonged to no single culture but represented the best of all. Egyptian painters began incorporating sea motifs into their tomb decorations, while Cretan potters learned to use Egyptian pigments that would keep their colors bright for millennia. Some of these sea peoples would later become enemies, the mysterious invaders who helped bring down the Bronze Age world in a great catastrophe that historians still struggle to understand. But for now, in Egypt's golden age, they were partners in the great human project of learning from one another, proof that the sea connects rather than divides. Along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, in prosperous cities like Byblos and Ugarit, Egyptian diplomats maintained embassies, the ancient world's first permanent foreign missions. These weren't military outposts, but centers of learning and cultural exchange, where scholars and scribes from different civilizations worked, side by side. Here, in the scribal schools of Ugarit, Egyptian students learned new forms of writing. The alphabet, that revolutionary system that would eventually spread around the world, was being perfected in these coastal cities. Instead of hundreds of hieroglyphic symbols, a mere 30 letters could record any word, any thought, any dream. Egyptian scribes recognized immediately the power of this innovation. They studied Syrian poetry with its different rhythms and themes, mathematics that approached problems from new angles, astronomy that recorded star movements unknown to Egyptian sky watchers. Meanwhile, Syrian students came to Egypt to learn hieroglyphs, the sacred writing that could capture not just words but concepts and ideas that had no equivalent in other languages. They studied Egyptian medicine with its sophisticated understanding of the human body and engineering techniques that had built monuments to last forever. The palace archives of these cities, preserved in clay tablets baked hard by accidental fires, read like letters between old friends separated by distance, but united by affection. "Send more gold, and we will send more cedar wood," writes one Syrian prince to his Egyptian counterpart. "My daughter is well and sends greetings to your queen," adds another. "The harvest has been good. Let us celebrate together when the trading season brings your ships to our harbor." These were the ordinary correspondences of extraordinary cooperation, proof that diplomacy at its best is simply friendship writ large, the recognition that human needs and human joys are the same, regardless of language or geography. What the ancient Egyptians understood, and what we sometimes forget in our modern world, is that isolation makes us weak, while connection makes us strong. They learned that you don't have to abandon your own culture to appreciate another's, that difference and similarity can coexist like the two lands of Egypt itself, united under one crown. They discovered that trade is more than commerce. It's conversation between civilizations. That diplomacy is more than politics. It's the patient art of finding common ground in the rocky soil of human difference. That treaties are more than agreements, they're promises made by one generation to the next that peace is possible. That understanding can triumph over fear, in their willingness to learn from others, to adapt and change while still remaining. Essentially Egyptian, they showed us how to be both rooted and open, both proud of our heritage and curious about the wider world. They proved that a confident culture has nothing to fear from foreign influence and everything to gain from foreign. Friendship. The gold and ivory of their ancient trade have long since crumbled to dust. The treaties are carved on broken stones scattered across archaeological sites. The ships that carried dreams and desires across ancient seas rest beneath Mediterranean waters, their treasures now treasured by fish and coral, but the idea they championed lives on, as powerful today as it was 3,000 years ago, that people of different cultures can meet as equals, can learn from each other without losing themselves, can build something beautiful together that neither could create alone, that the human family is large enough for all its children, diverse enough to be interesting, similar enough to understand each other across any divide. Rest now, knowing that across our modern world, people are still reaching out to each other, still learning, still building bridges of understanding over the rivers of difference that seem to separate us. The human story continues, and it's still, fundamentally, a story of hope. A story of merchants sharing meals with strangers, of children playing games that cross all boundaries, of leaders choosing peace over war, of ordinary people creating extraordinary connections that last far longer than the lives that made them. Sleep peacefully, dreaming of harbors where all ships are welcome, of markets where all voices are heard, of a world where difference is not feared but celebrated, where the human heart recognizes itself in every face it meets, regardless of the color of skin or the sound of language or the shape of prayer. This is the legacy of ancient Egypt's golden age. This is the dream they dreamed for us, and it's a dream worth carrying into tomorrow. Take a deep breath and let yourself drift to a time when great empires, like elderly trees, began to show their age. Even the mightiest civilizations, like the people who build them, have their seasons. Egypt had enjoyed a glorious summer under the great pharaohs, but by 1100 BC, the first autumn leaves were beginning to fall. It wasn't a sudden collapse, but a gentle fading, like sunset over the desert, still beautiful, still majestic, but with shadows growing longer. The pharaohs still sat on their golden thrones. Priests still performed the ancient rituals, but the world around Egypt was changing. And change, as we all know, can be both frightening and inevitable. The great building projects slowed, not from lack of vision, but from the simple reality that resources were needed elsewhere, defending borders, maintaining what had already been built, caring for a population that had grown used to prosperity. From the northern seas, like a great storm that had been building for years, came waves of people seeking new homes. They called them the Sea Peoples, though we still don't know exactly who they were. Perhaps refugees from collapsing cities. In Greece and Turkey, perhaps warriors seeking fortune. Perhaps simply families looking for safety, carrying their children and their hopes in painted ships. They brought iron weapons harder than bronze, and new ways of fighting. But more than that, they brought the restless energy of people who had nothing left to lose. Egypt, grown comfortable in its greatness, found itself facing an enemy that fought not for glory, but for survival. Ramses III, the last truly great pharaoh, met them in battle, both on land and sea. The temple walls at Medinet Habu still show these conflicts, carved in stone, but what they really show is an old world meeting a new one, and the painful process of adaptation that follows. Sometimes the greatest changes come not through conquest, but through integration. Libyan families who had served as mercenaries in Egyptian armies gradually rose to positions of power. Their children grew up speaking Egyptian, worshiping Egyptian gods, but carrying the desert wind in their hearts. When they finally took the throne around 945 BC, they didn't destroy Egyptian culture, but embraced it, added their own flavors to it, like spices in a familiar recipe. The pharaoh Shoshenq, mentioned in the Bible as Shishak, was as Egyptian as any pharaoh before him, yet brought new energy to an aging kingdom. From the south, from the kingdom of Kush, came perhaps the most remarkable chapter in Egypt's long story. The Nubian kings who had learned Egyptian ways, who had built their own pyramids in the desert, looked north and saw the land of their teachers in decline, and rather than rejoice, they felt called to help. Pi, Taharka, Shabaka, the black pharaohs as history remembers them, ruled Egypt for nearly a century. They were more Egyptian than the Egyptians, restoring old temples, reviving ancient traditions, bringing back the artistic styles of the great pharaohs. Picture Taharka, dark-skinned and proud, standing in the great hall at Karnak, not as a conqueror, but as a guardian of civilization. He saw himself as the true heir of Ramses and Thutmose, carrying forward their legacy when others had forgotten it. Sometimes the greatest love for a culture comes from those who chose it, rather than those who were born to it. From the east came the Assyrians, efficient as machines, organized as armies. They had learned to use iron not just for weapons, but for administration, for control, for the systematic management of empire. They conquered Egypt, but found it too large to hold, too proud to break, too complex to understand. Like trying to cage the wind or bottle the Nile, Egypt bent, but would not break. The pharaohs retreated to the south, waited, and when the Assyrians left, quietly resumed their ancient ways. This was Egypt's gift, the ability to absorb, to endure, to remain essentially itself even when ruled by others. In 525 BC, Cambyses of Persia succeeded where others had failed, not through superior force alone, but through understanding. He became Pharaoh, performed the ancient rituals, respected the gods. Egypt became a province, but a cherished one. Yet the flame of independence never died. Amertaeus, Nectanebo, the last native pharaohs, kept the old dream alive, building temples, maintaining traditions, proving that political control and cultural identity are different things entirely. In 332 BC, a young man from Macedonia walked into Egypt, and everything changed. Alexander the Great, barely 25 years old, came not as a destroyer, but as a liberator. He drove out the Persians, visited the oracle of Ammon, founded a city by the sea, and then, like a bright comet, moved on to other conquests. But he left behind something new, a Greek-Egyptian world, where pharaohs spoke Greek, where Egyptian wisdom mixed with Greek philosophy, where the ancient and the modern danced together one last time. The age of the great pharaohs was ending. But Egypt itself was eternal, like the river that gave it life. It would flow on through Greek rule, Roman occupation, Arab conquest, Ottoman administration, British protection, always adapting, always enduring, always remaining, in its deepest heart, Egyptian. What we learn from this twilight period is that endings are also beginnings, that cultures don't die but transform, that the greatest civilizations are those flexible enough to bend without breaking, wise enough to learn from their conquerors, and strong enough to influence those who think. They've conquered them. The pharaohs were fading, but their legacy was just beginning to spread across the Mediterranean into the consciousness of humanity, becoming not just Egyptian history, but human heritage. Rest now, knowing that some things are too beautiful to disappear, too meaningful to forget, too important to lose. The pharaohs may be gone, but their dreams of permanence, their love of beauty, their quest for meaning, live on in all of us. Take a deep breath with me now and let your mind drift back to those golden sands of Egypt, where our journey began so many hours ago. The last pharaoh has fallen. The Roman eagles now cast their shadows over the Nile. But something magical happened. My friend, something that even the mightiest conquerors could never touch. Picture this with me. It's a quiet morning in the Egyptian desert. Centuries have passed since Cleopatra's time. The wind whispers softly across the sand, and there, rising from the earth like ancient guardians, stand the pyramids. Still there, still watching, still, keeping their eternal vigil. You know, there's something deeply comforting about this. These monuments that our ancestors built with their own hands, with their dreams of forever, they're still here, outlasting empires, outlasting kingdoms, outlasting the very civilizations that tried to erase them. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built over 4,500 years ago, was already ancient when Moses walked the earth, already old when Jesus was born, already a wonder when your great-great-grandparents were young. And it's still there tonight. As you rest your head on your pillow, think of all the people who have stood before these pyramids, explorers and dreamers, scholars and poets, perhaps your own parents or grandparents, if they were lucky enough to travel there, all of them feeling that same sense of awe, that same connection to something greater than themselves. The ancient Egyptians believed in something beautiful. They believed that speaking someone's name, remembering their story, kept them alive in the world. And how right they were. Tonight, as we've shared their stories, we've brought them back to life. Pharaoh Khufu, who dreamed of touching the sky. Queen Hatshepsut, who showed the world that a woman could rule with wisdom. Young Tutankhamun, who died so young but became immortal. Their names still echo, their stories still inspire, their legacy still lives, and you know what's truly wonderful. Their wisdom has become part of our everyday lives. When you visit a doctor, you're benefiting from Egyptian medicine. When you see a beautiful government building with columns, you're seeing Egyptian architecture. When you read about justice and law, you're touching ideas that first bloomed along the Nile. The ancient Egyptians gave us the 365-day calendar. They gave us the idea that everyone, from the poorest farmer to the mightiest king, deserved to be remembered. They gave us the dream that love could conquer death, that beauty could last forever, that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things. In museums around the world, and quiet halls where footsteps echo softly, you can still see their treasures. Golden funeral masks that caught the light the same way they did 3,000 years ago. Papyrus scrolls with love letters, shopping lists, children's drawings. These aren't just artifacts. They're messages from parents to children, from lovers to beloved, from dreamers to dreamers across the vast ocean of time. And the Nile, that magical river that started it all, still flows, still brings life to this desert, still carries the dreams of fishermen and farmers, just as it did when this story began. The feluccas, those beautiful sailboats, still drift downstream at sunset, their white sails catching the same golden light that blessed the Pharaohs. The farmers still plant their crops when the river recedes, still gather their harvest under the same stars. Perhaps that's the most beautiful legacy of all, the reminder that some things endure, that some dreams are so powerful they outlast the people who dreamed them, that love and hope and the human desire to create something beautiful, these things are eternal. So as you drift toward sleep tonight, remember this. You are part of this story too. Your dreams of creating something lasting, your love for your family, your hope for the future, these connect you to every person who ever lived along the Nile. The pyramids still stand in the desert. The stars still shine over the Valley of the Kings. And somewhere in the gentle darkness, the ancient spirits of Egypt are smiling, knowing that their story, their legacy, their dream of forever lives on in you. Sleep well, dream of golden sands and eternal stars, and know that some things, the most beautiful things, never truly end. They just wait patiently to be remembered, to be loved, to be passed on, like a gentle river flowing through time, carrying dreams toward forever. And so our long journey together comes to its peaceful end. For over 2 hours now we've walked together through the sands of time. We've watched the sun rise over the Nile for the very first time. We've seen simple villages grow into mighty kingdoms. We've witnessed the birth of wonders that still take our breath away. We've stood beside the great pyramid builders, felt the weight of ancient stones, heard the whispers of prayers carved in temple walls. We've sailed with pharaohs and queens, shared their hopes, their dreams, their eternal longing for something beyond this world. Now, as your eyes grow heavy, as your breathing deepens, let yourself sink into the comfort of your bed, just as the ancient sands of Egypt have settled, layer upon layer, over thousands of peaceful years. Imagine yourself floating gently down the timeless Nile. The water is warm and calm and crystal clear. Above you, the same stars that guided the pharaohs twinkle softly in the velvet sky. The gentle current carries you past sleeping temples, past dreaming pyramids, past the eternal Sphinx who watches over all dreams. You are safe here in this ancient river of dreams. The worries of today dissolve like morning mist. The rush of modern life fades like distant thunder. Here there is only peace, only the gentle rhythm of water lapping against papyrus reeds. Listen. Do you hear it? The soft whisper of desert wind through ancient stones, the gentle murmur of the Nile flowing toward forever, the quiet breathing of sleeping pharaohs who found their eternal rest so long ago. They are at peace now, those ancient souls. Their pyramids keep watch while they dream. Their stories live on while they rest. And now you too can join their peaceful sleep, Let the golden sands cover your thoughts. Let the desert stars guide your dreams. Let the eternal Nile carry you gently into the deepest, most restful sleep. The pharaohs sleep peacefully in their valley of dreams. The pyramids stand sentinel through the quiet night. And you, dear traveler, you too deserve this rest, this ancient, peaceful, eternal rest. Sleep now like a pharaoh in golden dreams. Sleep like the desert under starlight. Sleep, and let the ancient spirits watch over you until the morning sun rises. Again, over the Nile. Sweet dreams from ancient Egypt. Good night.